what I want to do this evening is actually give you an experience. Like, I want to give you an opportunity to leave here with an elevated emotional experience. So I'm going to talk a little bit, and me talking for a little bit is a challenge. I'm going to talk for a little bit, and I'll see if I can keep it to a little bit. The way I was going to structure tonight is I'll talk for a little bit about emotions. I've just got 3 models I'm just going to work through. So just dipping into this idea of emotions. And obviously this is a preparation for the end of the week where I do a half-day workshop, and I'll talk about that at the end. We'll draw some prizes for it. That's going to be really practical. I want to get into what are the most practical tools I've found over the last 20 years for managing our emotional state, and why that's so important for us to have those tools at our disposal. Which tools are best for the short-term stuff and which stuff is better for the long-term stuff. So I'm going to go over that over the weekend. So I'm going to talk for a little bit. Then I'm going to get you to do an activity in groups of 5. And it's going to start preparing you, start creating a different vibrational state internally. And then I'm going to get you to lie down and do a guided meditation. That's why we've asked to not have open cups in here, because we're going to be moving around a bit. So before we do the activity, you're right, mate. Before we do the activity, I'll get you to shift your open cups out of the way if you've still got any in here, so we don't knock those over. I'm going to put you into a guided meditation. My aim there will be to take you into an elevated emotional state, but in an altered state of consciousness. What we want to do is we want to bypass the critical part of our brain, which is challenging everything that comes against what you believe your identity is. So I can say to someone they're beautiful, but if it doesn't match their beliefs about themselves because of whatever's happened in their past, they can deflect that. But as we take someone into an altered state of consciousness, and what hypnotherapists do, we'll put someone into an alpha or theta brainwave state to get past that critical bypass, to put some, of the right stuff in there. So we're going to finish up. I'm going to tell you how beautiful you are, and I'm going to put you in a state where you actually receive it. And you take it into your souls, and you take it away with you tonight. So that's where we're going. For me, part of all the things happening, as well as this is my last Tuesday night presentation at the practice as part of the practice team. I've been running the coaching team since the practice opened, and I worked with Octavio and Rob when they just had an idea, a thought, before it became energy, before it came form, and before it became this thing that you're sitting in now. So I've been involved in the practice for about 4 years, and I'm going to finish up on the 1st of June. So another transition. So lots of stuff happening. I got into this path. Look, I think life gives you, whatever it is you need to wake you up, and the right person to wake you up at the right time. My time wasn't until I was about 29, and it wasn't until this guy came along who was about 6'7". He's got about 300 teeth, huge teeth. Anthony Robbins. 1999, or just before then, I was at a bender of a weekend. I'd been drunk all weekend, sleeping all day, woke up at about 2 a.m. in the morning, flicked on the television, which is something I wouldn't normally do. And here's this guy, telling me about this 30-day program that he's got, and he's just boring into me, hypnotising me into picking up the phone and ordering this program. So Easter 1999, I did this program, this 30-day program, and it changed the course of my life. A couple of specific changes I made. I started yoga at that point, stopped getting drunk, and that changed a whole lot in my life. And I went vegetarian, so major shifts. I was still in the army at that stage. I was a major in the army. And some of my mates didn't take it too well, me deciding to become a yogi and all the stuff that goes with that. Talking about emotions, I remember my best mate used to cut my hair with clippers. So he's cutting my hair, and I'm over his place, and I'm sitting there, and he's cutting my hair, and I'm like, you know what? He said, last couple of days I've been feeling really sad. And he said, shut the fuck up, I'm not your psychologist, I'm just cutting your hair. So that was the environment I grew up in as far as expression of emotions. Again, I grew up in an environment where I wasn't taught to express my emotions. I had a lot of anger issues. I remember writing a poem when I was 12 years old, which talked about anger. This anger I feel makes me want to get back at everyone. This anger wants me to show them how I felt. But I knew I could not win, I would not win even with this anger. Something along those lines. And instead of people looking at that and going, or my parents looking at that and going, oh, I think he's got some anger issues, maybe we ought to get him to a child psychologist or counsellor or something like that. I thought, what a great poem. Let's put that in the school magazine. So good. Well done, Carl. No worries. Let those anger issues just fester and fester for a little bit more and guide the course of my life because I didn't have the capacity to process those. So part of the 20 years for me is like peeling back these layers. It's a constant piece of work. Working on these emotions when they bubble to the surface, letting them come, processing them, waiting till the next time you get triggered and the opportunity presents itself to work through these emotions. So I'm going to look at 3 models. And I sort of say that I've had sort of 3 principal teachers over those 20 years. The first definitely was Tony Robbins, and he was the right guy to wake me up at the time. Since then, my favourite teacher is Joe Dispenza. Anyone follow Joe Dispenza's work? If you don't follow his work, I highly, 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 highly recommend his work. Joe Dispenza wouldn't have got through to me, 20 years ago. I wasn't open to the message that he was communicating. I needed that guy, that Tony Robbins guy, the big guy, to metaphorically punch me in the face, to wake me up. And when I woke up, the 2 things for me was, woke me up to be more self-aware and woke me up to be more responsible for my actions. So taking personal responsibility. Because up until that point, I'd believed that the things happening around me, outside of me, were something else's and someone else's fault. I hadn't taken personal accountability. So a major shift in my life when I decided to take personal accountability. Changed the course. And then I worked on this self-awareness thing. And for 20 years, I've been reading hundreds of books, doing lots of things to try and build up my level of knowledge, practice what I learn and gain experience from that with the aim to gain wisdom. And as I teach, I used to think that knowledge plus experience equals wisdom, and it sort of does, but there's something missing. And what I realised was that wisdom is potential wisdom. Because have you ever known something, even experienced that something, but still made a stupid choice and did that same thing that you actually had the wisdom to know not to do? Is anyone guilty of that other than me? So what happened? You knew it, you had the experience, so you knew it, you had that shocking relationship experience, and then you go out with the same guy again, or the same girl again. Like, what's that? I thought I had the wisdom. But the thing I've learnt is that's potential wisdom. The ingredient that needs to get added to that is consciousness. I need to be conscious in this moment to be able to make a choice based on this wisdom that resides there. And that's what the work at the practice is about. It's doing these practices to allow you to get into the state to be fully present, to sharpen your body, to become more consciously aware of what's happening in front of you, more able to respond and not react, and drawing on that wisdom, taking that energy up your spine, having a higher capacity to handle life as it unfolds around you. So the 3 models I looked at that I thought I would share, this is the triune brain model. So there's upper brain, mid, and lower. And this is a generalization. It's not split down the middle, right and left hemispheres and that, but it's a quite good model to give a sense. This is also called the cortex. This is also called the limbic, or what I like is the reptilian brain, and this called the sort of cerebellum and brain cell, but I like reptilian. So when we start digging around in emotions, we come to this piece, talks about most of the emotions we experience and the brain's processing of emotions happening at this level. And lower, this is sort of subconscious to unconscious going down this pathway. Upper cortex, and certainly when we get to frontal lobes, is where we actually, so frontal lobes, sort of the front, behind the forehead, this for me is where we sort of have this level of consciousness. And if we get hijacked by our emotions, so the brain uses, over 20% of the oxygen and 20% of the fuel for our body, and it's, I'm not sure whether it's 3 or 6% of the body weight of the body. So it takes a huge amount of energy to manage and maintain this. What happens when we get emotionally triggered is we slip out of this and we slip into our midbrain. We go into this reactive state, and we can go really reactive and we can act like a lizard, like not real smart. Or we can act like a dog, or we can go human and stay up here. So what happens when we get triggered? And my big thing is, if I have an issue happening in front of me, if I'm triggered and I go into a fight or flight or freeze response and I drop down to this lower part of my brain, I may be trying to solve problems as a dog. And how do dogs solve problems? Maybe they, bark or pee, eat things, maybe, I was going to say hump things, or like, those aren't the best solutions for what's coming in front of you. The other thing that happens is when we go into a stress response, instead of having a broad perspective, our vision goes narrow. And this is okay when we're trying to solve a physical threat in front of us. Brain's been designed to narrow focus, so we become hyperfixated on what's in front of us so we can deal with that. When we're more relaxed, we have a broad perspective. We can see the whole picture. So if I have an experience and I can't manage my emotions and I get triggered and I go into a reactive emotional state and I drop down to my dog brain and I go, tunnel vision like this, how good a solution am I going to come up with in that particular situation? Am I going to come up with the right words to say in that conversation I'm having with my partner? Am I going to come up with the right words in presentation like this? In anything we do, the more we can stay in this calm state of mind with a broad perspective. Think of a sage-like man or woman. They're moving along very gracefully. Something happens in front of them. Sit there. Maybe they're, this is interesting. Staying in that calm state of mind. They're able to then draw on this wisdom they have, which is potential wisdom. And they're able to bring it piercingly into the situation they're dealing with. They can't do that when they go reactive like this. So our work is to do practices to allow ourselves to stay more into this place, to come more from that buddhi of the mind, to be more making conscious choices. And not conscious, if we make a choice but it's just a regurgitation of the past, that's not a conscious choice. We want to come into a situation, have enough calmness, stability, groundedness, see what's in front of us, dig into our treasure trove of life experience and knowledge and bring the right thing for this particular situation. And it may require a bit of this and a bit of this and a bit of this to put into that particular thing. So it's so important for us to learn how to manage our emotions to be able to do that. The second model I was playing with is, this is a person. These are the 7 chakras. So Dr. Joe Dispenza, whose work I'm a huge fan of, ties in extremely well with the traditional tantric hatha teachings as well. But he uses different terminology, and because he wants to connect with people that are non-yogis, instead of calling chakras, which might take people out of alignment, he'll call them energy centers. And people are like, oh, I'm okay with energy centers. So he's able to have conversations with scientists, doctors, medical professionals, getting them to understand that changing our emotional state and allowing ourselves to go into elevated emotional states actually has got huge healing possibilities and potential, something that's been known for thousands of years through yogic teachings. So what he would say and he calls these sort of survival emotions, the emotions that we have down here, and from this it would be these sort of emotions down here. And these are like, once we get past, our fourth chakra, heart chakra, once that opens up and energy flows up, then we're getting into elevated emotional states. And so we're tapping back into the work of Rod Stryker. He would talk about the lower three centres, the lower chakra being about fear, second chakra about attachment, and third chakra about identity, maybe even ego. So our work is like to evolve beyond these, to do practices, to take this energy up higher and move into these more elevated states and get out of survival. Most of the time, we're going into a reactive survival state of mind. And from a health perspective, this is a different vibrational frequency. One thing I work with my coaching clients on is I get them to realize the difference between looking at something through the lens of judgment. And if I'm looking through judgment, I'm judging right, wrong, good, bad, and I'm really attached to my ego of how things ought to be. And when we think judgment, what's the vibrational frequency of judgment? Does it feel light or heavy? Light or heavy? Heavy. So when we talk about changing the lens, and you can do this just as a pattern interrupt. NLP would call it a pattern interrupt. When you catch yourself being judgmental, ask yourself, what lens am I looking through? And I want you to switch out the lens of judgment, and I want you to put on the lens of curiosity. How does the vibrational frequency of curiosity feel? It's a different energy entirely. And just by looking at that different lens of perception, you see the world in a different place. You're able to be open-minded and have a view on something from your past experience, but look at it curiously from lots of different angles. And because you're not judging it, you're not getting triggered into these lower emotional states, and you're able to stay in an elevated emotional state. So I want you from this day forward, if you take nothing from this presentation but that, is to be able to catch yourself out when you're getting agitated with something and ask yourself, what is the lens I'm looking through? Am I looking through judgment or am I looking through curiosity? And if I put the glasses of curiosity on, how would this whole situation change? If I got curious to why my partner reacted the way they did, if I got curious about why my boss said what he said to me, if I got curious about why I got the results on a particular test I was doing or something I was doing or that job interview, if I got curious about it, curious creates learning. Judgment keeps you trapped in your past. Curious, learning, growth, evolution. Judgment, stuck in your past. Huge change. So the third model I was going to talk about was, let's call this desires, wants. Can you see where this is going? And this is this thing called reality. And this is the gap. The bigger the gap is between the reality of the experience you're having in that moment and what you think it should be, ought to be, must be, all of that stuff, the bigger the gap, the more emotional discomfort you're going to feel. Who's read the work of Byron Katie or followed the work of Byron Katie? Okay, you guys have got some reading to do. There's a great book by Byron Katie, and she's a beautiful role model and a beautiful person who's just got the most phenomenal sense of equanimity. And her book is called Loving What Is. And she's all about loving what is instead of fighting this thing. If we got better at, And the question I get my clients to say is, to interrupt the pattern might be I get reactive and I start going that way. When I ask an empowered question, I flip the path there and I start taking myself back up into cortex. This is where I answer questions. So if I ask myself the question, what's the reality? It's a powerful interrupt. Take that away with you tonight as well. You're getting yourself caught up in whatever, and stories are coming up and something from your past, and someone had the same perfume on, and someone gave you the same look or talked in the same tone as your mother, and you're getting caught up in this whole show. Also known as a shitstorm, you step back from that. And you say, what's the reality? Oh, the reality is, they said this. The reality is they've been sleeping poorly for the last 3 nights. I know because I've heard them tossing and turning. So the reality is maybe they weren't in their best emotional state to actually have this conversation that I sort of forced on them. I had a mini meltdown last night as I'm trying to sort stuff out in the house, and I knew this presentation's coming up and I got the workshop on the weekend and sort of trying to get settled, and then there's a leaky pipe or whatever, and I'm just like starting to go troppo. And I've tried to have a conversation with my girlfriend at the time, and I just might as well just punch myself in the head. It was just, I wasn't in the right emotional state to have that conversation. So part of emotional mastery is actually knowing, am I in the right emotional state to have this conversation now? And there's some physiological things we can do as well. If I want more blood flow to my brain, I want to be calm, I want to be well hydrated, I want to have the right fuel in my body, I want to take a break. So we get asked by someone, hey, do you want to have this conversation about this thing? And you're like, whoa, I'm not in the right emotional state now. If this is important stuff, give me 15 minutes, half an hour. I'm going to go away, I'm going to drink some water, I'm going to eat some food, I'm going to relax a little bit, and then let's come back and have this conversation. That's enough talking for me. Any questions? Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select someone out of the audience to come up here out the front, introduce themselves, tell us where they're from, and then talk about what the biggest challenge is that they have in their life at the moment. So I see lots of eyes looking down, lots of people squirming as I sort of go through. People are trying not to catch my gaze as I go around the room. There's some people up the back there, they think they're hiding up the back, and some heads looking in different directions. And thus end the exercise. What emotions came up for you? Just shout out some emotions. What came up for you when I said that? Excitement. What other emotions?
Oh my God.
Oh my God. What other emotions came up? Wonder what I'll say. What other emotions? What am I going to say? What is my biggest challenge? What's my name? Did anyone have fear? Did anyone think, what an arsehole, putting someone on the spot like this? I haven't had any preparation. Everyone had a different range of emotion, judging on your path and your past life experience. So I just said something, and it's the meaning that you gave to what I said that caused this emotional response in your body. So much of the emotional experience we have is based on the stories we tell ourselves internally. It's a topic I love, and it was a topic I first got into as what's our beliefs? What's the internal story? And that was I've written these books, and the latest one I've just put out now, it hasn't come out yet, is The Successful Mind, but it's looking at beliefs. It's looking at what are the stories I'm telling myself which is causing me to go in this reactive state because of this particular situation. And if we want to stay open and expansive in life and in these elevated emotional states, we need to keep doing the inner work to process that stuff as it comes up. I could go on and on and on, but I'm going to wrap up the yapping there.